Hi, my name's Nicholas and I live on a 102-year-old wooden motor yacht built in 1922. In last week's video, I walked through what was an emergency haul-out that I performed after an incident that took place just shortly after supporting the start of the race to Alaska. We're going to pick up where we left off, of putting the boat back into the water, all things fixed, to exit the Fraser River and continue onwards with my cruise. After navigating the 14 miles down the Fraser River from Shelter Island, where I hauled out the boat, into the Strait of Georgia, I turned northbound to Gambier Island, where I met up with some of my friends from Vancouver, who I met during last year's cruise up the Broughton Archipelago. They have a really fun, fast boat, and we dropped some crab traps and had a nice happy hour to catch up.
It's so heavy, it means it's full of crab. This one's legal. Yeah, he's too small.
So if you know me, I love to cook, and if you're gonna hand me some fresh crab, I'm gonna cook you some fresh pasta. The first step was to have the crabs and throw them in boiling seawater for 12 minutes. Then I had to make some pasta dough using some fresh eggs, semolina flour, and EP flour. The hardest part to any fresh crab meal is picking the crab, and always requires a glass of wine. For a sauce, we used fresh shallot and garlic butter sauce, which goes great with crab and was covered in Parmesan cheese. After departing Gambier Island, I went northbound to a really cool anchorage called Secret Cove. What makes this anchorage really cool is historically, the cove was used by ex-Royal Navy seaman Larry Kelly, who was paid to smuggle Chinese laborers recently unemployed from the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railroad down into the United States where there was more work. Later, during Prohibition in the late 1920s, this cove was also used to smuggle alcohol. What's cool to think about is that Argonaut was passing by these waters in that same time period. I took a quick dip before taking an evening cruise to nearby Buccaneer Bay, and then crossing over the strait to Jedediah Island, where I spent the next day, including exploring the island and an old homestead, an apple orchard, and some wild sheep that had been living on the island for quite some time. The homestead had been privately owned, but was recently sold to the Canadian government to be protected as a marine park going forward. I next headed southbound to Nanaimo, where I made a stop for water, and then went over to the famous Dinghy Dock pub, where I got some fish and chips and a beer, and then spent the evening at the Nanaimo bar, which I highly recommend as a great place for both entertainment, drinks, and the owner is absolutely wonderful. Nanaimo is a great stopover for southbound boats trying to go through Dodd Narrows, which is a pinch point between all the water coming up from the strait into the Gulf Islands. Currents can reach up to 9 knots, and so you have to be really careful about trying to time it at slack, which is the time when flood current turns to ebb, or the ebb current turns to flood. During this time, the water isn't as turbulent and it's safe to cross. Whereas if you go at the wrong time, you can be facing really strong and dangerous currents that can turn the boat around and actually push you backwards or into the rocks. As I was on a bit of a timeline to go all the way south to the San Juan Islands and meet up with my friends on the Tally-Ho, from Nanaimo, I went to Clam Bay on Thetis Island, then Saturna Island at the southern tip of the Gulf Islands, in order to make the crossing into the San Juan Islands and clear through customs in Friday Harbor. Friday Harbor is an excellent place to pick up and drop off friends, re-provision your boat, drop off recycling, and even do your laundry. I actually met up with the previous owners of this boat who live on San Juan Island, and we caught up over a burger and beer at the San Juan Brewery. To get away from the busyness of the Port of Friday Harbor, I made a quick hop over to Blind Bay, south of Orcas Island, and ran into a very cool 1938 converted ferry, Annabelle, which is now a floating houseboat based out of Tacoma. After hanging out with the Annabelle crew, I made a quick burger before an early bedtime to get up in the morning and make my way down to Watmough Bay, where I was going to meet up with some friends who are cruising north from Port Townsend. Many of you might be familiar with the boat Tally-Ho, which is a 48-foot gaff cutter built in 1910 that recently underwent a complete rebuild from the keel up in Port Townsend. For those in Port Townsend, you might also be familiar with Sailport Townsend, run by a friend of mine, Amber, who does the local sailing and charter operation. The three boats Tally-Ho, Argonaut 2, and Best Day Ever from Sailport Townsend are going to be cruising together for the next few weeks, and I'm meeting them in Watmough Bay. Because I'm arriving early, I agreed to cook a falafel dinner for everyone, so here's some cooking footage from the galley. So I was still cooking the meal when Tally-Ho showed up, and in all the excitement of the raft up and the kickoff to our cruise, we got to eating dinner right away, and I actually never took any footage of the meal, but I can assure you that it turned out great. The next day we woke up to some beautiful weather and decided to take Tally-Ho out for a sail. We had a few beautiful tacks before we had an unfortunate drone incident, and then myself, George, and Amber went ashore to go chase down a missing drone. So here's some quick footage about that.
You ready?
See you, Amber.
Thanks for the lift. All right, let's do this.
Yep. Watch behind you. I see it, yep. There it is. How's it looking? Oh, we broke an arm.
Yeah, 3 out of 4.
All right.
Okay.
Give me a thumbs up.
All right, and there's Tally-Ho.
Oh, and there's Tally-Ho. George, tell us a little bit about what just happened.
I was flying the drone as we were setting head sails and getting ready to jibe, not being as observant as I should have been, and it was flying kind of like a wide circle around Tally-Ho and strafed into these trees. Luckily, it fell in a pretty nice patch of moss. We have one broken rotor arm, but that's not a huge deal. And now we're on our way back to Nick's boat, Argonaut, and Amber's boat, Best Day Ever.
Best day ever.
Best day ever.
Mission success. At the end, the drone was a little bit damaged, but it's fixable, and we can kick off our cruise in the San Juan Islands. For the next few weeks, I'll be joining Tally-Ho and crew as we head north into Canada, but the first week is going to be spent with the entire group in the San Juan Islands. So that's all for today. Please subscribe and join me next time where we go through our first San Juan Island adventure together.